Welcome to this session of the Ancestral Healing Summit with my guest, Karena, Virginia. Our topic today is making space for the miraculous. Karena is a Sounds True author, yoga teacher, healer, and spiritual mentor who specializes in helping children, teens, and adults overcome addictions, codependent behaviors, and unhealthy family dynamics by utilizing ancient spiritual, scientific, and energetic modalities. After having a near-death experience as a child, she spent most of her adult life researching and practicing the science and magic of miracles. She's observed many miracles in her life and the lives of others, and she believes everything and anything is possible once we get out of our own way and recognize that we have everything we need already within us. Karena believes many of us have been healing generational traumas over this past year, and while it may have been challenging, the universe is absolutely conspiring to help us free ourselves from limitations right now. Karena, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with everyone who's participating.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about miracles, which is one of my favorite subjects. As we mentioned, you've observed many miracles in your lives and things that happen with other people. So let's get started with that. Tell us a little bit about your experience with miracles.
Well, I love that you love miracles also. And I love that you asked that question. You just got me excited. Oh, I experienced miracles as a child. As a child, I saw beyond the earth dimension, but I didn't know that I was observing things that other people didn't observe. So I thought it was just, I didn't understand that it was a miracle, and that there was this miraculous energy in everything. So I've lived 40 something years. And in these 40 something years, I've seen so many because they started way back then. But most recently, I've seen people heal from stage 4 cancer. I've seen people on, just most recently on ventilators with doctors saying absolutely no way that this person will be okay. I've seen them get up and walk out of the hospital. I have seen heaven send messages to the earth realm after loved ones have passed away as a means of comfort. I have seen people who don't believe in the miraculous discover that there is no scientific proof of how these things that have happened to them can happen or could happen. And I've seen them experience such bliss in knowing that there is this constant love that is working at all times to bring us into our peace and our joy and our love and to give us hope. And I've also experienced loss. I've experienced grief from people I've loved very dearly. My father died very young, but I saw him leave this dimension and I saw him go into another dimension. And then I had moments with my family who really always thought I was just so out there saying, wow, this really is happening. So the miraculous can save lives. The miraculous can also help us when we lose someone to know that we've never really lost them. Just the physical form, that's it.
Yeah.
But, I've seen small miracles, big miracles. It would take us probably a couple hours for me to even tell you some of these stories, but there's been a lot. I did have a student who, it's really, really amazing. I've had I've seen quite a few people heal from cancer that were told that they wouldn't. But I did have this student who had breast cancer for a second time that went into her chest bones, like throughout all of, into her intercostal muscles and the ribs and chest. And she decided that she was going to receive a miracle. She made that statement, and she owned her value in receiving it. And she did so much work. She did a lot of work on healing ancestral trauma too, but a lot of energy work and a lot of prayer. And it's interesting because I knew her as a yoga student, and they were paying for chemotherapy, and their hospital bills were ridiculously expensive. And so one day she said that they really couldn't afford their bills, and her husband was a builder. And so we had bought a new house that needed renovation. And I said, perfect, bring him over. I'll introduce him to my husband. We'll find work for him. And so he worked at our house while she experienced her miracle. And he came over, and he was this big Italian man. He came over and he cried his eyes out. And the doctor, the cancer was gone. And I'm not saying this lightly, because they could easily be watching this summit. This really happened. And I just bumped into her, of course, in the grocery store, which is one of the few places I go right now. But of course, because that's what happens too. We bump into those people who remind us, and who we remind, those angelic connections. So, that's just one of many. But as we talk about some of the ancestral healing, I'm sure that there'll be more miracles that I share.
Yeah, you're right. I think as we roll along, things will pop into mind. I think one thing that I find interesting is, and I agree with entirely, is that you say that miracles are much more likely if we get out of our own way. I think that's the hardest part. And I understand that you had a miracle that happened when you had the courage to break your silence about something. Would you tell us about that?
Oh, yeah. So I had an experience where I was very called to speak truth to power. And there was no way that in my mind I was going to do it. And I saw some other people standing up, and I said, wow, these people are brave. There's no way I'm doing this. I'm going to teach my yoga classes. I'm going to talk about love and peace, and I'm just going to act like that part of my life that I was going to talk about never existed, and I'm just going to keep it quiet. And people who know about it, I'll just let them know I'm not going to hurt my family and be public about something like this, and I'll explain it to them, and they'll understand, and it's fine. And my entire body contracted. My throat closed up. It was just everything. I could feel part of my body just closing down. And I was meditating, and I got a message, and the message was, you have an opportunity now to heal for your ancestors, and to heal for your children and their children, your sister, your mother, your family that's alive, their children. You also really are, everything is love. You're in a position where if you don't, that's fine too, but your body's going to react. Your body's going to feel it. And I got this very intense sort of, I don't want to call it a download. It was this inner knowing, because it was more like my higher self that just knew that there was something that was going to happen with my thyroid. There was something something was going to happen where there was some kind of autoimmune, something was going to happen to me. So what I recognized was that I was going to have difficult energy to deal with. but I had two choices. It was going to be either from external factors in people or from internal, from inside myself. And I know that there's nothing worse than being in our own way. So in a lot of ways, it was an opportunity to create space for miracles. And I'm actually working on a book that's called Creating Space for Miracles. And so I love that. That's why we chose this title, because it's my experience of freeing my voice and watching how, even in the beginning, it was awful, but it was beautiful because the healing happened in time for me, for my daughter, for my son, in my relationship with my husband, for my mother, for my sister, for my sister's daughters. And I come from a European background. My father was put in a home with priests when he was a teenager because his father died and his mother couldn't afford to support him. He was the oldest. And he had some really hard things happen to him in Rome, Italy. And he also knew starvation. He moved to America and didn't speak any English. He met my mother in New York City. My mother was born and raised in England, very British, and Mom met bigger than life Giulio, Giulio Ferrari. Oh my God, he'd walk in a room and everybody, it's Giulio. And then there was my mom, like, oh, stop, please be quiet, be polite, So, so much ancestral trauma from both sides of my family. So that's when I really started to understand. And also, I was speaking about something that I found out later was my cousins in England. I found out later there's been generations of this in my family that I never knew about. And I knew from my father. My father had been he'd been sexually assaulted when he was a teenager with a priest. So I knew that I did know in my mind. But the cells and the physical body, they keep score, they keep score of known and unknown energies. So when we make space for the miraculous by healing ancestral trauma, we get out of our own way by plugging into the divine, which I believe is our biggest job every day, to plug into the divine. You look at a lamp. If the lamp is on the table, like the one behind me, and it's not plugged in, it's pretty, but what's the purpose, right? If we plug ourselves in every single morning to the divine, however we experience the divine, whether it be God, nature, sacred, Buddha, whatever it is, for me, it's God. Then the only limitation is this, because everything we need will show up for us. And we discover that things don't happen to us, they happen for us. And when we have a clean canvas, using our voice could be a way to create a clean canvas, healing subconscious thought patterns that are just stuck in the body, which I refer to as the clutter in the back of the closet that we really don't want to touch. So we leave it there. When we take it out and we look at it, and we don't just bypass it, but we do the work to heal and feel to heal. And we process energetically, emotionally, however it works for us. We create this clean canvas that can be painted with the most beautiful colors. And as I say paint, I do believe this is a Renaissance period that we are living in right now. And I do believe that many of us, and I've seen this with myself and with clients and friends and family, many of us are healing with our ancestors right now. And they're working through us, they're working with us. And we have this opportunity to paint, to create our design, to use the blueprint of ourselves for the highest good, and to trust that, just like Michelangelo said, right? I just kept chiseling away and the miracle was there. That's all we need to do, chisel away our own blocks, and the miracle shows up.
Right.
And those blocks also are in our energy field too, which I want to make sure we talk about. They're not just in the cells.
Right. Yeah. In fact, let's back up just a bit, because I think it's really an important point that anybody who Googles your name knows the story that you're talking about. So I know what you're talking about. And I think it's interesting that on your father's side, well, first you said that there's sexual assault on both parental sides. Your father was very outspoken. He used his throat chakra, but your mother's side, very English, very reserved, shush, keep it quiet.
Oh, yeah.
So it sounds like that's a really interesting inner struggle. And do you think it's because of your father's ability to speak up that you were able to overcome what you learned from your mother?
What a beautiful, beautiful way of looking at it. You know, I've never even thought of it like that. Thank you. Yes. Yes. And it was confusing. It was confusing for my brother, my sister, and me, to have this father that was really bigger than life. I mean, he even had this huge aura. He passed away way too young, but his heartbeat was just everywhere. If he walked into a space, that energy stayed, and people tell us that to this day. But yeah, he used his voice. He even used to sing opera, and you know, I mean, he did not close off his voice. He did have some heart chakra stuff from childhood pain, and he did die of heart disease, but never with his voice. And what's interesting is that my mother always, now I do believe that our parents always do their best, and I adore my mother. My mother always cared so much about us being proper, about us respecting our elders, but not just our elders, a teacher, even if that teacher was abusive to us. You know, as children, we were taught that we just sat there and listened, and we said, yes, please, no, thank you. And we were afraid to speak up. Mm-hmm. And I believe my mother was raised that way too. And just from stories living in England, she was definitely my grandmother, her mother. When I came out and spoke publicly, my mother's brother, my uncle Peter in England, called my mother, and it was about 10 o'clock at night, his time, and he called my mother, and my mother told me, he said, I just saw Karena on the BBC. What on earth is she doing? And of course, my mother went into trauma mode too. And even my brother and my sister stayed home. Oh my gosh, are we all okay? And it was tragic in so many ways. It really was. But again, and I, you know, I'm not talking about what I went through that year. I'm talking about where I am now, 4 years later, right? That year was really hard. But sometimes we're given opportunities to heal things that don't necessarily mean, it doesn't mean they're easy. Some people leave marriages or leave jobs. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, but they're making space for their soul's calling or their purpose, or to live into their magnificence and their brilliance. But that is one of our biggest fears. Living into our brilliance is frightening. Staying small is much easier.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I love what you've been saying. Let's talk about how these things actually do live in your energy field. Like, for example, what's coming to mind is the fact that, again, you said that on both sides of your family, there is this type of assault, abuse, whatever words you want to put to it, and that energy now lives in both of their fields. And when they combine to create your body, your DNA now expresses this specific vibe. And it's my personal belief, and I'm sure it's shared by others, that a predator can sense that type of vibe and they're attracted to that. So by doing this type of work, you're sort of forcing yourself into looking at that vibe in your own field. So what sort of healing did you actually experience from this? Really, this was a scary thing you went through. I couldn't imagine. It took huge courage.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I should say that I'm not necessarily, so courageous, when people would say, oh my gosh, Karena, you're a badass. No, I'm not. Far from it. I have so much of my mom's hiding in my cells, hiding from being burned at the stake, or hiding from being punished, or hiding from a big one for me is hiding a part of who I really am, because I'm so afraid that it will upset someone and they will tell me. And then I used to, because I've really healed a lot, I used to go into such shame. And it wouldn't take a lot for someone to say, you didn't come to my wedding and I was expecting you there and I know you were, and for me to go into this place of second guessing and shame and, a lot of codependency things. So back to your question, there are fields of energy in the yogic tradition. There are fields of energy that live outside of our physical body. So it's our aura, our biofield, our electromagnetic field. It's, named different things, but I did study with a Kundalini master in India, and this is not Kundalini yoga as what a lot of people know of. I did study that too, but this is Kundalini yoga as taught by a man who learned the science of these energy fields from another man who learned it from his father, and they all live in these huts. So in order to have access to these teachings, either you have someone who has the ability to get on Skype, or you go to India, and it's still really hard to be with these people because they don't want to necessarily share it as much as just live it. And they do want to help people, but they're not people who are going to stand up in front of a bunch of people and, teach a class like we're used to in America, or, not just in America, but most of us are used to. So he explained that there are these five levels of healing in our energy body. And one of them is where acupuncture and acupressure and sound helps us heal. Also where homeopathy helps us heal. So homeopathy, even though we ingest it, is really working on the energy field. Another one is where we heal our inner child wounds that are subconscious. A lot of the trauma we experienced in our bodies when they were smaller becomes an imprint that is not a conscious memory. But that doesn't mean that it's not fully alive. Oftentimes that is in the field, in the energy field. So energy healing is not about necessarily looking at what happened when we were 3 or 4 or 5 and remembering it as much as setting the intention to do the energy work to clear it. And when we do that, sometimes something may come up where we have an opportunity to use our voice, or we have an opportunity to stand up for something. That's why there's so many people, I believe, that are truly activists right now. There's something moving through them. It's not like they just decide to be so passionate about certain things. And it can be very lonely to be an activist and to feel so passionate about something when your friends are like, yeah, I mean, I care, but, what are we going to do? Or, it can be a very lonely, scary place, but there is something. To all you activists, there is something moving through you. Again, we're in this Renaissance period. Then there's also a field which is generation after generation after generation. And that energy field, many of us have no idea. We've never met these ancestors. We can go way back. Some people say 7 generations back, 7 generations forward. I've heard that one as well. This particular person just said it's in our field and it can go way back. So healing energetically is not only the chakra system in the physical body or the nadis in the physical body, or healing the nervous system and healing heart wounds. Healing energetically is recognizing that this subtle body is so incredibly in tune with everything. And as the veil between heaven and earth is thinning more and more, which it is right now in this new time, this new age, some refer to it as, even sounds and smells, it's interesting that COVID takes away our smell. Like, what is all of this on a spiritual level? We are becoming very sensitive because our subtle body is vibrating at such a high frequency, asking for healing. Because this is a time where our ancestors are working through us to help heal us and to help heal the world. They're not just hanging out up in, heaven, just flying around. They're doing work and they're moving through us. So this field, I just want to grab my tuning fork. Don't worry, I'm coming back. But I just had, an idea to it's not going to sound the same because we're using technology, but if you have a tuning fork, if you just close your eyes for a minute and think about this subtle body, this field all around you, right? And we just let this sound with the intention of love and healing and miracles come in, just let this sound into this field as you inhale. Just exhale. And that's sound healing, very quick bit of sound healing. So there's so much that we can do right now. So much. Or shake the body, dance. I dance around my entire house. I put music on and I shake it out. And when I feel things coming through me, I'm not going to let them get stuck in my body. I will shake, I will dance, my neighbors think my neighbors have always thought I was crazy. I'll get on a bicycle with a basket and I'll be like, doing this kind of thing. I move the energy. And in this time in the world, what's most important is that we allow ourselves to be in our satya. In yoga, satya means truth. We allow ourselves to be in our satya. Mm-hmm. Right? And ahimsa is another sutra in yoga. Ahimsa means nonviolence, right? Many of you know this. But it doesn't only mean nonviolence towards another being or another animal. It means nonviolence towards protecting other humans, even if they don't know we're doing it. So if we see a fire, we're not going to go, oh, there's a fire. Hopefully someone will call, paramedics. So ahimsa means preventing the violence that we know is happening. If we see that fire, we saw that fire. If we experience something and it's come to the forefront through someone else, are we going to, I'll tell you one thing. After I spoke up, the majority of the hate that I received was from women. And I think a lot of that is that we often judge others when we're really judging ourselves. And these patterns, we repress them so much in our body, in our energy fields. And how dare that person talk about something that I was told never to talk about? How dare her? And how stupid it is. And what's the big deal? And it happens so, whatever it is, there's a story. So our energy field creates stories. Our cells create stories. And if we don't reframe those stories energetically, they will continue. Because if we're healing from ancestors in the past and it's unknown energy, we can talk and talk and talk our way through it, but we continue to sabotage. We continue to, pick up whatever that is. That's our numbing, addiction of the week or month or year or 10 years. When we heal energetically, we can heal unknown energies that live in these fields, that live in the physical body. And what I love so much about this time is that this is work I've honestly been doing this work since I was a child, because I was very, very in tune to these things, but I didn't understand. And when I learned science in school, I was like, this is so boring. And then as an adult, when I learned science through quantum physics and I learn it the way that it makes sense to me, it's fascinating. And now science has gotten on board. Science has showed us, just the way they study mice. They took mice and they exposed them to cherry blossoms, and the mice were all happy, and then they shocked the mice. Then they tested the offspring of the offspring of the offspring of the mice and exposed them to cherry blossoms, and those mice went, So they're doing more and more studies like this, proving the science behind this. And when science and spirituality meet, sky's the limit. Absolutely. Because the science without the faith, without the prayer, without the intention, without connecting to our ancestors, for example, and asking them to come in, is just information.
Yeah. Well, I also love that. Well, I don't love that this happened to you, but I love that you brought up the reaction that you got from women, because if I recall, this whole thing happened right around the same time as the Me Too movement it really just exploded. And a lot of women were put on the hot seat, because I don't know anybody who hasn't had a similar type experience. I certainly have. And you are taught, it was just the way it was back then, that men could, we're not man bashing, it just, these are facts. Many men were taught that this is just how you act. I mean, if you watch TV shows and movies from back in the 50s and 60s, Mad Men, women were just there for men to grab, period, end of story, and women tolerated it. So for women now to speak up and say, this is what happened to me, this is wrong, this is the harm that was done, and this is the healing I'm asking for. I can see how women who have been told, you shut up, you don't talk about this, can be very angry at somebody who is speaking up. But let's bring this back into ancestral healing perspective and the fact that all of this is going on now. This is becoming a topic that many people are beginning to learn about. And I agree that this is time. Our ancestors really are sort of pushing forward for us to clear out all the old gunk, so that when we do enter this new age, we're not bringing a bunch of garbage with us. I don't really have a question to go along with that, other than an acknowledgement of what you've been saying so far.
Yes. Yes. And when I talk to some of the other women that we have, like we call it the very strange sorority, like, how did we meet? But we're so different. And I look at them and say, you have so much courage. And they say, why do, and I say, because God worked through me. I didn't do this. That wasn't even me that did it. And they just laugh. But I say or the divine moves through, an energy moves through me. And, it's interesting. We don't really see that part of ourselves because we have our coping mechanisms, right? That's a whole nother story there. But also I think as much as I really did feel this love for women at that moment too. And this real anger towards women being called liars. And that's what initiated it all. But it wasn't that I was just this amazing person who just cares so much about other women. I knew that there was something that needed to come through me as well. So, some people just say, oh my gosh, you're just so amazing that you could stand. Well, I've gotten a lot more hate than that over the years, but no, it's not just that I care about people. Yeah, of course I care about people. I'm an advocate and an activist for the human psyche and always have been. But we're all born. Some people are activists for animals. I love animals, but I'm not someone who's going to drive around picking up, animals all day, right? I do know people who do that, or people who are real activists for plastic in the environments. I've seen them in garbage cans pulling black plastic out, and I go, gosh, I would not be doing that. I'm just being honest. I care, but maybe I'll be more careful about how I buy it, recycle, of course, but I've been so passionate about abuse my whole entire life. And any time that anyone has been abused or in any way, especially when they're not aware of it. So there is that part of me that really does care. But there also, and maybe it's a combination of both, that actually moved the energy through me, knowing that it was a call. And if I didn't take it, someone else would have, because God knows there's a lot of others out there. This reminds me of a client I had who, so the way that I work is not so much through just talking as much as through energy healing, right? And this client I had a long time ago, I think she might have found me on a summit, and I never met her. So we worked over the phone, but she told me that she was very large. And when she told me how much she weighed, it was, very large. And that she couldn't get on an airplane. Things had to be made a certain way for her because of how large she was. And that she had done everything possible to lose the weight. And so most of the people that I work with are people who've done a lot of work already, but they still can't get past something. So we go into the energy of it. And it just so happened that, miraculously, she had been doing her family tree for her mother. And so I was fascinated by it. I love antiques. I love history. I love old trees, anything that has an imprint of that. So long and the short of it, she started showing me pictures of her mom, of her grandmother. She even had great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother. Her family held on to all these photos. And what we noticed was that each of these women were thin until they got married. And so we know that we put on weight, or we hoard, or we hold on to things to protect our energy field, right? So a lot of women that struggle with weight know that they might be holding some extra padding to protect from abuse, or to protect from being hurt. A lot of us that are highly sensitive, if we don't have the right tools, we will, even just collect stuff, or we do all sorts of different things to protect our energy field. But this was different because she had already been out of that marriage for years. But there was a belief that it doesn't matter if you're in it or not. Once you get married, it's done. And so healing that belief in her energy field is how she finally lost weight.
Hmm. That's really fascinating. That's the stuff that I love about genealogy is, as you said, sometimes you won't even recognize a pattern until you look back on your people and find out what they looked like or what they experienced. And I also love that you mentioned that she tried everything, because that's really common, isn't it? Where people have tried therapy and all sorts of other methods, and nothing works until they sort of stumble upon ancestral healing.
Yes, I know. I know. It's fascinating, but it does make a huge difference. And again, we don't need to know because it could be someone who's adopted, right? We don't need to know the energy. We don't need to have all of the specifics in order. We just need to clean it out. We need to purify it.
Mhm.
I had another client who was married, and she and I did work together, and then she really just found liberation in a lot of ways. And by the way, if anybody is interested in doing some of these things on their own, I have a YouTube channel. There's a lot of content there, so you can just go on YouTube and do some of the meditations. It's Karena. If you Google, you just do Karena yoga actually, and there's a lot of very easy exercises. So, but I'm sharing these stories to give hope. And I also want people to know that there are tools. There's a lot of tools out there for you. But she got to a point where she had lifted her vibration so much that she wasn't able to resonate with her husband. And she said he's been blocked for all these years. So he was not open to doing any energy work. But somehow, some way, she got him to say yes. And what we discovered was that, and he was born in the 1930s, like late 1930s. Um, and when he was a child, he had memories of exactly what his kitchen looked like, and I've been given permission to share this story, obviously without names, but I have been given permission to share. Sitting with his brother and his mom making a specific dinner, and he knew the color, everything, and all these memories did come back to him. But what didn't click was that all he was saying was that his mom was very sick. His mom's very sick. But what didn't click was how she was sick. And so, how did she get sick if she was making all that food? He remembered laughing with her, but then she got sick. So, what was it? He said that he never knew. And he said that he remembered being a child, and the neighbor came and took him and his brother, and they were kicking leaves on the streets because he remembered that it was fall because they were dried leaves. And kicking, and they went to the neighbor's house, and then when they got home, their mom was gone, and their dad told them that she was sick. So he got to see her where she was, and she was slumped over in a wheelchair all the time, and she couldn't talk to them, but he never knew. So finally, we started digging a little deeper, and I had like a feeling about this, but we started digging a little deeper. And I asked his wife if she could find a little bit more information. And this man didn't talk to his brother anymore, just from a lot of trauma. Anyway, she was back then, if a woman spoke out, or if a woman was a lot of the ways that many of us women are learning how to be, but are afraid of because of generational trauma. We're afraid to speak out. We're afraid to make space for miracles. We're afraid to be magnificent because we're afraid of these, not just stories we've heard, but energetic patterns that have been in our families. So this woman had a lot of passion and was very esoteric, and her husband put her in an asylum. And the reason why she was slumped in a wheelchair was because she was constantly medicated.
Ah, it's it's both heartbreaking and really exciting that we're
Yes.
learning that this is the root of many of the
Yes.
things that were the issues, the problems, the illnesses.
Yes, absolutely. Because even the cell. So when there's something going on in our DNA and in our genes and cellular, makeup, can we heal it? Absolutely. Even if there's a predisposition to something, can we heal it? Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And yeah, I mean that's a pretty devastating wake up to realize that as a child, to see that. Sometimes we have those moments where we go, oh, but what it helped him with was to know that his mom didn't, he had a lot of abandonment issues. And he was so afraid his wife, she couldn't even go out without him freaking out. Where are you going? And so she just said, I need to break free of this box. And as she was breaking free, he was holding on more until we worked on that. Your wife loves you. He could hear it over and over again. Your wife loves you. He could hear her. How many times do we have our own insecurities where, we drive our spouse crazy? Like, don't you love me? You don't love me enough. How can I show you how much I love you? But if there's a daddy wound for a woman or a mommy wound for a man, etc., or, women with women, men with men, relationships. But what he realized was that his mom did love him. And his mom didn't choose to get sick. In fact, she didn't, because how does your mom go from laughing one day to all of a sudden being in a wheelchair the next day? And, basically his father was saying things like, well, she never really loved you guys. This is how it has to be. So when he realized that his mother didn't have the choice, he healed the part of him that felt like other people were going to abandon him because they were making that choice. Because to him, right? So what are our biggest fears? Rejection, right? Fear of rejection from the energy of rejection, or our own lives, childhood too. But it goes further than just our childhood. Because we could do tons of inner child work and that energy can still be there. Abandonment, betrayal. So these are big and they weigh on us day in and day out until we can look at them or look at the energy around them and make the decision to make space for the healing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the healing happens. And that's what's so amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I love that you mentioned that you have many things online. Let me give your web address. It's KarenaVirginia.com. If people visit your website, will they find links to your YouTube channel and all of the other resources that you offer?
Yes, there should be a link to the YouTube channel from my website. Yes. Perfect. And also, Essential Kundalini Yoga is a book that I co-wrote with a dear friend, and that is also on Amazon. That has a lot of discussion on ways to heal the energy field. A lot of practices as well.
Beautiful. All right. Well, unfortunately, we are running low on time. I would love to hear more. Again, if people would like to connect with you, it's KarenaVirginia.com. In the couple minutes we have left, is there anything that we either have not spoken about or something that's new coming to your mind that you want to make sure that we cover before we wrap?
Well, first of all, I've just loved this so much. I could sit here and talk to you about this for so long because I would love to hear what you have to say about it. So I'm definitely going to be listening in on this summit as well. But I did want to say that I created a special audio recording that I just, I sent into everybody at the Shift Network, which is a deep relaxation to help call in our ancestors and to help heal the energy field. It's 30 minutes long and we put some really nice music to it. So that was really enjoyable for me to do. And I like to think of that as a little gift that from my heart, because I have so much passion for this work, and anything that I can do to help others heal just fills my soul with purpose and happiness.
Well, thank you. That sounds like just a beautiful offering, and we can all use all the help we can get. So thank you for offering that. And thank you, Karena, for being with us today. This has been a really interesting and heartfelt conversation. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
I appreciate all of you too. Thank you. And thank you, everyone else. Big love.
All right. Once again, I've been talking with Karena, Virginia, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation in the Ancestral Healing Summit.